Hearing to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Dominguez. Here. Hart. Here. Hotchkiss. Here. Murillo.
Here.
Rouse. White. Here. Mayor Snyder.
Here. So I only see public comment speaker slips for budget-related items, which is great. So I'll open and close the general public comment section. Just so everyone knows the order, what we're going to do is we're looking at the entire budget. We know that there's a specific things I know we need to discuss about the library, but we're going to do everything else first. So staff and others who may want to comment on everything but library will be able to do so, and then we can focus on the library budget. So I see that there's some public comment for non-library stuff, so you don't have to wait till the end if you don't want to. So, but with that, Mr. Samario.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Bob Samario, Finance Director. So we are scheduled to adopt the budget in a couple weeks on June 27th. We've scheduled two meetings today and on Wednesday, during which council can provide us direction on the budget based on the presentations they've heard over the last 6 weeks or so. So we're going to go over to everything today, the things that we're looking for direction on specifically from council, and then we'll just wait for direction. I just want to quickly recap what we've done so far during the public review. And then we'll get into the Finance Committee recommendations. As you know, the Finance Committee, concurrent with Council's review, looked at a number of topics related to the budget. And so there are some recommendations coming out of those meetings. And then since even the Finance Committee review, we've had other items come up that we're going to ask direction from Council to adjust the budget for next year. And then we'll go through the deliberation and direction up on those items, and then we'll finish off with a discussion and some direction from council on the library admin fee.
And just to be clear, even though we have scheduled a budget hearing Wednesday, it's possible we could do everything
Correct.
Tonight and not need the meeting on Wednesday.
Yep.
Just putting that out there, everybody. Okay, thanks.
So real quick, we did have 6 council public hearings. They were all special meetings, meaning they were dedicated just to the budget, during which each of the departments presented their respective budgets. We also have, as I kind of alluded to, 5 Finance Committee meetings, and you could see the topics that they covered. Not all the items were action items. Some of them were informational, but we covered the general fund revenue assumptions. Those are for the taxes primarily. We also looked at the proposed general fund and enterprise fee adjustments that excludes the utility rates. We also had some staff recommended adjustments. They reviewed potential funding of small energy projects, which we'll talk about, funding requests from community organizations. Information only item was on the city's retirement plan, as well as the reserves and policies. And then lastly, information only was a review of sales tax data by sector. So these are the things that we look to the Finance Committee for recommendation to the City Council, and this is what they unanimously recommended. They did support the revenue assumptions that are contained within the 2-year financial plan for the general fund. Also, the proposed general fund and enterprise fund fee adjustments, again, separate from the utility rates. The staff recommended adjustments, which are included in attachment 1 to your agenda report. They also recommended a list of small energy projects, which are contained in attachment 2, which I'll cover briefly. And then lastly, the funding requests from community organizations, which are attachment 3, a summary at least. And then a part of that, we have the letters from the 3 organizations, C3H, PATH, and the Housing Trust of Santa Barbara County. Those letters are attachments 4 through 6. So looking first at the requests from outside organizations, there were 3 requests. One, again, from PATH, which is the Casa Esperanza. They had asked for continued funding of the current level, $125,000. We funded $125,000 in 16 and in 17. It's contained within the 2-year financial plan, so we as staff assumed that council would be interested in continuing that funding, so that request would not have an impact on the budget since they're already part of it. The request from C3H was a 10% increase to the current funding of $91,000, so it added another $9,100 for a total of $100,000. And this is just to cover additional costs and staffing that they're incurring. As you could see, with a funding recommendation for that amount, small dollar amount, would come from the appropriated reserves. That would be staff's recommendation. And then the third item is a request from the Housing Trust Fund of Santa Barbara County for, it's really 2-year funding of $25,000 each, so a total of $50,000. This item will be brought to the City Council separately by staff, I think in early July 11th perhaps, where they'll be recommending an agreement that provides for 2-year funding coming out of what's called the Socioeconomic Mitigation Program funds. These are monies we received a number of years ago. They're not part of the general fund, and this is where staff would be asking council to fund it out of those funds on a one-time basis of $50,000 spread over 2 years. So really the impact here, if with Finance Committee's recommendation, is the $9,000 increase. That would be the incremental impact of the general fund. And I won't go into these details, but there was a lot of discussion about funding energy projects which have some payback. The context initially was if we were to get a 1% sales tax approved, if it was on the ballot and approved, we'd be looking at much bigger projects. But there was an interest in looking at smaller projects and how we might fund those. And we came up with a list of projects totaling $120,000. This is facilities and energy staff. You can see they're very small projects, primarily related to upgrades to the LED lighting, and which have a payback of 6 years or less. What our recommendation would be to take the $120,000 out of our general fund reserves and treat it sort of as a loan, and they would be paid, that loan would be paid back over the 3 to 6 year period from the savings they generate from these projects. And then once the loan is paid back, then they would enjoy those ongoing savings for these projects. But you can see they're very small. Again, LED, there's a couple of projects related to adjusting controls or implementing control systems where for example, lights come on only when there's a person in the room and those kinds of things. And then the staff recommended adjustments, I wasn't going to go into them. They are, again, attachment 1 to the report. We went over them in detail with the Finance Committee, and they did unanimously recommend approval by council. So I'd be happy to answer questions on those if you'd like to at some point. But again, they are part of your agenda report as attachment 1. And then lastly, or not lastly, but one other item that came up since the Finance Committee review, wasn't part of that at least. As you know, we received $2.5 million a couple months ago as a result of the settlement for the oil spill. So that $2.5 million is gross before attorney fees of $600,000. The one restriction that the settlement replaced on those funds was that $1.5 million be used for parks and beaches. So our proposal and recommendation would be that we transfer the $2.5 million to our capital fund and appropriate those monies to 2 projects, $1.5 million to the Cabrillo Pavilion and Bathhouse renovation project. As you know, that project is about $4 million short, so this would shorten or reduce that gap. And then the balance of $1 million would be allocated to the Thousand Steps project. Now we would have to pay attorney fees out of these monies, so it would reduce those projects by a total of $600,000. $360 the attorney fees would go to the Cabrillo Pavilion project, and $240 would be taken out of the Thousand Steps project. So it's not going to be those full amounts, but it works out to be about $1.1 million to Cabrillo and about $760,000 to, or $40,000 to the Thousand Steps project. And that will be coming tomorrow to council to appropriate those monies, and so that'll actually be done as part of the fiscal year 17 budget to transfer those. So it won't be reflected in the 2018 budget. It'll just be this year, then carried over to next year. And a couple other items. There was a fee change that came out late in Parks and Recreation for a flexible and fit class. They've seen participation being a little bit low, and so they wanted to make some changes that they expect would result in increased participation. It would eliminate the fees for a 6-week program and instead create a Saturday-only classes with some punch cards. So they have a 12-class punch card of $106 for non-residents and $96 for residents, and then a 6-class punch card of $96 for non-resident and $54 for residents. Again, they believe that these small changes would increase participation. And then, as you know, we had always funded the CSO program out of the general fund. It was sort of one-time money we've carried over for a couple years. And the proposal here was to shift the funding to the downtown parking fund, where we did create a new downtown ambassador program that would no longer include enforcement, but instead focus on observing and reporting and creating a more consistent and visible presence downtown. So this money would be transferred out of the general fund on an ongoing basis. So it would be continued funding, every year funding out of the general fund to the downtown parking fund to fund this program. And then lastly, as you remember, during the year last year, or this past year, there was some shifts in who pays for the MTD shuttle program, the downtown and the waterfront shuttle. We shifted those program costs to the waterfront as well as downtown parking. And when those contracts were finalized, we noted that the waterfront portion, they had underestimated the amount. So this is just really asking for additional appropriation authority next year in their budget to cover that additional cost, and that will come out of the reserves. So that's all the items. So this is really where we're looking for council direction. This is the summation of everything we just talked about. The last item, number 9, really we don't need council direction because that will be coming to council tomorrow for approval for the current year. So it's really items 1 through 8 where we're looking for direction from council. And again, the Finance Committee essentially approved most of these items.
Okay. So any questions? And they do have 2 public comment speaker slips on non-library related items that I'll bring up. Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So thank you, Mr. Samario. So related to the attorney's fees and the oil spill money, that's not because we lost the lawsuit. Those are the attorney's fees we're paying to outside attorneys that we needed the outside expertise,
That's
correct?
correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
It just sounded the other way, so I wanted to make that
Sorry.
clear. Thank you.
Any other questions on this part? Okay, we can have a couple of minutes here at the podium. We'll have Gerardo Ayala and then Mesa Hickson. Good evening.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Gerardo Ayala, and I'm a resident of the city of Santa Barbara and the former Arts Commission for the county for the 1st District. I want to start by thanking you, Madam Mayor, because you've probably been the best arts mayor the city has ever had, at least in my lifetime. So thank you for all you've done. I watched the state of the city again today, and it's remarkable the accomplishments that have happened over the last 8 years while you've been mayor. You've been very visible and great support, so I really want to thank you. Last week, you asked Nina Johnson about a master plan for the city of Santa Barbara. And her response was about something that the Santa Barbara Foundation is doing called the Creative Communities. I don't think that was, that answer did not satisfy me at all. I think that listening to the budget hearings around the art, one of the things that I think we need to do to move forward and to get this master plan is possibly for the city to consider in the future years hiring its own art staff and severing its contract with the county of Santa Barbara. I think that you're not getting the best deal for your buck in regard to that. And I think that if we're going to move forward with the master plan, especially given what's happening with State Street and in retail, the city really needs to commit by hiring its own staff. It used to have its own staff many years before they went to this new model, and it's time to consider returning to that. So I think that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mesa Hickson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and esteemed council members. Last week, the Administrator's Office unveiled its 2018 budget for arts funding, and I believe the city still needs to articulate a more viable financial picture for the future of the arts in a city that prides itself on its aesthetic charm and economic viability. The predominant concern seems to be State Street. The new 101 Underpass Art Project, rolled out by the City Administrator's Office, will use tax dollars to decorate the grim tunnel on Lower State. And while I applaud this effort to add art to the area, a large amount of money is aimed at removing the smell of urine and reducing car noise in the tunnel. Why not launch a design competition for free and aesthetically pleasing public toilets on State Street, like the retractable ones they have in Amsterdam? We need bold, new public art commissions and creative solutions to our State Street problems, and we humbly ask you to listen to your visionary artists and curators first, not as a last resort. We are not mere decorative Band-Aids. We are the lifeblood of this beautiful town. And instead of adding police officers and removing State Street benches to prevent homeless from congregating, why not add 25 new live performances and interactive artworks as part of a brand new bench concert series? How about starting an artist in residence program at City Hall, in which artists provide insight into the city's urban design and infrastructure projects from their inception? And rather than contracting 2 county art staff members for the city and county, why not create a dedicated city arts department with its own qualified curatorial staff to initiate interesting public art projects? The local arts community will hold the city accountable to its stated goals of producing exhibitions for State Street, sculpture pads, the airport, and City Hall Gallery. And we all know the only way to ensure this is to put adequate funding towards staffing and actually paying for these key initiatives, specifically for artist time and materials.
Thank you.
And I commend you, Madam Mayor, for your specific request for a legitimate city arts master plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's that component of public comment. Anything on the items in front of us right here from council? We need to give direction, and then we'll move on to the library. Mr. Hart?
I'd move the staff recommendation.
Moved by Hart, second by Rouse. Any other comments, or Ms. Murillo?
I'd just like to thank the Finance Committee for doing the heavy lifting, right? They did so much review of the fee adjustments and the energy programs and everything else. Thank you, and I'm ready to vote yes on the motion, Madam Mayor.
Great. We'll have more discussion on the library stuff, but I have to say that this budget has one of the fewest amounts of changing parts during its process, and I think that's a good testament of us giving you direction and you being able to figure out how to make it work, and yet, it was a good process, so I just want to commend you on that. All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's unanimous. All right, good.
Okay,
Part 2.
so part 2, library admin fee. As you can see, I have Jessica Caliente, the library director, is here. I'm actually going to start it off. So when the library presented its budget, I think it was May 22nd, we were asked to bring back more information on the library admin fees, more details on how it works, how it's created, but also what the impacts are to the various county branches of this admin fee. The proposal, as you know, in our budget called for the admin fee to go from 9% to 18%. There was some discussion about maybe phasing it in, and we wanted to present to you today what that looks like, different versions of that plan, either all or nothing or some phased-in version. What we wanted to do is give you a little bit of background, however, because I know there's been talk and confusion about what is the admin fee relative to an overhead. So I want to give you a little bit of sort of a primer on overhead and how that relates to what an admin fee is, because they're really different animals, and even though they're related. So first, let's talk about what city overhead is. So as you can see on the left-hand side, our general fund, as you know, is broken up into 12 departments and plus the mayor and council's office. But we could also be organized differently. It's organized between what we could call the central administrative functions like finance, city attorney's office, administrative services, and within that you see programs like payroll, human resources, and the like. And then below that are the operating departments. That's the outward-facing departments and programs like police and fire and parks and recreation and public works. So all of the central administrative functions and departments happen to be housed within the general fund. So the entire finance department, in terms of the administrative portion, is in the general fund. All of the city attorney's office is in the general fund, even though we provide services across the organization. So like the enterprise funds, they will benefit from my time, payroll's time, city attorney's time, even mayor and council's time. So we have to find a way to allocate those costs to the extent that they benefit from those services, and we do that through what's called a cost allocation plan. It's a very extensive document We do it every year. We update it every 2 years. And it really establishes, and is consistent with federal law, establishes how we are able to allocate the central administrative functions across the organization. When we do so, we recover those costs, therefore, as revenue. We call that overhead revenue. But it's really about allocating costs across the organizations for these central functions based on the benefit they receive. And really that document, it just establishes how do we allocate those costs. So how does water benefit from payroll services, and how do we allocate those costs and so forth. So it just so happens that roughly speaking, the administrative costs are allocated or allocable about 50-50 between the general fund departments, because they also receive those benefits, versus enterprise funds. So you look to the right, those are all the enterprise funds, and we have a number of special revenue funds. So one of those special revenue funds happens to be the county library fund. They are separate from the general fund. They benefit from my time, payroll's time, HR's time, and so forth. So we allocate time to those costs to the county library fund. If you were to look in their budget, you'll see a line item called overhead. That's the cost that they're charged for all of those administrative times and functions. You'll notice that none of those things within the central administrative functions include the library. So again, that's nothing to do with library costs. It's just those central functions like finance and city attorney and so forth. So that's the overhead. Any questions on that piece before we get on to what admin fees are? Because this is really integral. Any city will have an overhead function that's based on a cost allocation plan. That makes sense? Okay. So let's talk about the admin fees. So now this is the library department. So if you look to the left, within the general fund is the library department, and they happen to be broken up into 3 major programs: administration, and then there's a central library program that contains 3 separate activities, if you will. One of those is public services, the other is support services, and then professional staff. So those are kind of the activities or functions within that central library program. And then below that, the East Side Library Program, so 3 major programs. There are only really 2 areas that benefit the county libraries. If you're looking at what costs are allocable to the county library. So there is the admin program that is allocable in its entirety, and some portion of that is allocated to or allocable to the county library fund. And then within the central library program, public services is more outward facing, doesn't benefit the county branches, so we don't allocate any of that, or none of those are allocable, if you will. So the only portions within the central library that are allocable are for support services and professional staff. And we've looked at those costs and those people, and essentially what we do is we allocated, or we could allocate to the county branches amounts based on the number of people that are in those branches and then the size of their budget. So that's what an admin fee is purported to do, is recover costs based on the people and their base, and also based on their budget. So this is all to explain really how we could allocate administrative costs that are incurred within the general funds library department to the county libraries, but we don't approach it this way. The way that the library has been recovering costs from the county branches is through a 9% admin fee that's applied to their operating budgets. It has it's sort of arbitrary. It's been in place at 9% for many, many years. Not sure how it started, but it's just a historical number. But it's not really reflective of the costs that are incurred by the library department to manage those county branches. So this is kind of looking at if we were to use this mechanism that's really part of our cost allocation plan to come up with what could that admin fee be. This is what that top section is. Again, we're not actually using this, and this is not what we're allocating, but this is what we could if one wanted to measure what the true cost is. So again, I've identified within the admin cost the 3 areas: the library admin, which is a program unto itself, and then the central library department support staff and central library professional staff. And I want to just have you go all the way to the right where it says total FY 2017 budget. So that's the total cost if you were to look at the library department's budget for those 3 areas. $558,000 is the total cost for the library admin program, and then $622 for central library department support, and $656. That's the total if you were to look at that budget for 17. To the left of that is the portions that are not allocated. So that's the portion that's retained and covered from the general fund's own revenues. The portion that is allocable, if we wanted to and could, it would be the $557,000. That's the amount that is truly allocable to the county library branches, and then to the left of that is how it would be spread into the individual county branches. And that allocation across those branches is really, again, based on FTEs, the full-time equivalent positions, and their budget, their respective budgets. Down below that, you can see that based on the historical way we've been allocating costs, the amount that we would allocate on a 9% basis, the same status quo approach, would only be $217,000. That's to the right. So $217,000 under the old way of allocating would be less than half of what we could allocate under an appropriate cost allocation method to the library. What the city had proposed is to doubling that admin fee, going from 9% to 18%. It would get us $434,000 next year. Again, still below the $557,000 that we could allocate here. So it's still short of full cost recovery. And then below that, you can see what the subsidies are at 9% or 18%. That's the portion effectively that the city is having to make up for what we could charge versus what we are charging. So again, this is a representation using a document that we prepare every couple of years, a cost allocation plan, and identifying what the allocable costs could be relative to what we are currently charging. And that's why basically staff said, we are so far below full cost recovery, it made sense to recover at least closer to that than we are, and doubling the admin fee. It sounds dramatic to go from 9 to 18%, but again, it's a percentage that's trying to get it closer to full cost recovery. Any questions on this piece?
Yeah, so just why did you choose 9% as opposed, or 18% as opposed to the full cost recovery number? Why has this dialogue been around that? Is it just because it was double and that's a lot?
Yeah, I think because it seemed like a dramatic number, and so I'm not sure your question was why it was 9%, but it's been 9% historically.
No, not that question. The question is why 18 as opposed to what it really looks like is 21%. That's, I think, when you
Correct.
do the math, the full cost recovery. So why did the dialogue fixate on 18 as opposed to 21?
Mayor Schneider, Councilmember Hart, originally when looking at the cost recovery, we were striving to be similar to the other county library zones. And as we discussed at the May 22nd council meeting, Lompoc this year is charging closer to 24%. We thought that Santa Maria was charging 18%. I'm not sure at this time what they are charging, but we heard that the other zones were doing 18%, and so we were looking to choose a number that was already out there. But as Finance Director Samario has indicated, the percentage is arbitrary. The full cost recovery is in the allocation plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
So to paraphrase, you thought this was a more digestible figure than full cost recovery?
Mayor Schneider, Councilmember Hotchkiss, yes. We determined that the other zones charging a similar amount, it would
Right.
be easy for us to move to that as well.
Got it. Thank you.
And are the other zones getting full cost recovery? I mean, meaning is that whatever percentage they're using actual, or are they also subsidizing a portion of those services?
Mayor Schneider, both library directors at different periods of time have indicated that there is subsidy occurring in Santa Maria and Lompoc. To what level, I don't know.
Okay. Mr. White, did you have something?
What is Lompoc's? I'm not familiar with Lompoc's program and what the fees are for, what their subsidies for, et cetera. Can you describe briefly? You might have some familiarity with that. So,
Mayor Schneider, Councilmember White, to my understanding, if things haven't changed over the past few years, the formula for the admin fee in Lompoc is an analysis of the hours spent by staff members at the Lompoc Library. So it's actual looking at a time analysis, and then they charge that time out accordingly.
so there are not other branches that the Lompoc Library is managing.
There's one branch,
Okay.
the Village branch, that is a
At
county.
Vandenberg Village?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but I really couldn't speak to what that city is doing for fiscal year 18.
I understand,
Yeah.
but just in concept. Thank you.
And then the Santa Maria zone, are there libraries outside the city of Santa Maria that zone is overseeing?
Mayor Schneider, the one municipal city is Guadalupe.
Okay. Okay, that's how it works out. Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Caliente, I'm not really that intimate with how the system works, but there's also the thought about value received. So if, for example, Central Library Services were just the Central Library Services and these other branch libraries were on their own, what would their ability to function cost as much as they get charged for admin, or would it cost more, or is that something that you would even be able to ascertain?
Mayor Schneider, Councilmember Rouse, the best case scenario that I can point to is the City of Goleta in their proposal to take on their city library and the costs that they would have to incur in order to do that. They did do a study in 2014, and it was significantly more than the admin fee to manage the library on their own.
Thank you.
Okay, those are all our questions. Go ahead, Mr. Dominguez.
Mine is more of a process or where are we question than an actual substantive question.
So why don't we wait till he finishes his presentation, if it's about the fees?
Well, I wanted just to get that kind of grounding so I know what types of questions I should ask. What are the options that council is going to consider at the end of the discussion?
Right, at the end of the presentation.
So I'd like to know that before we keep moving forward.
It's coming. So
Next or
like
at the
next.
end? Because you said at the end. So if it's
Well,
at
it's
the end, I
part
want to.
before public comment, before we comment.
And the reason I'm confused is we just had a motion and that was unanimously approved, and I'm having trouble because there's an A, B, and C, and it was recommend council approval. So are we seeking to approve the numbers that you're giving us, the 9%, 18%, or full recovery?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, we're looking for direction on that admin fee, whether it's as in the budget at 18% or something different than that.
So when you say looking for action, you want us to decide that question
Yes.
tonight?
Yes, and we'll give you
Okay.
some of the numbers and how various levels look
The reason
like.
I'm asking is it's not in the agenda report, and I wanted to make sure I didn't miss, maybe there was an amendment, or is there a page that was attached that I didn't see?
But this was direction we gave at the library budget hearing in May, whatever that day was,
22nd.
to come back at this particular meeting to discuss the options and give them direction.
And
That
there's no staff recommendation?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the individual branches and indicate what the impact is of going to the various levels of admin fee. One is if there's no change, if we left it at 9% and not raised it, and what would it do to them if we were to raise it to various levels all the way to 18%, which is contained in our recommended budget for 18. And it's really looking in the context of their reserve balances. So, for example, at the end of 17, the column that shows some black portion or shaded portion, the City of Goleta will have an estimated $485,000 in reserves for their portion in the county library fund. So those are their funds that they could use to help address some of the financial challenges are ahead. And I will mention at the outset, since we're talking about reserves, we saw the trend over a number of years ago that the reserves were being used a great deal across all the county library branches in order to keep them balanced. And 3 years ago, there was a direction from the county to develop a 3-year plan, and for the next 3 years, let's use those reserves, let's spend them down, and then we'll address sort of the ongoing structural issue moving forward. So 17 essentially is the end of that 3-year period, and where you'll see that in a lot of cases the reserves are down to almost nothing or minimal numbers. So let's start with Goleta. If we were to stick with the 9%, then they would see a $130,000 admin fee. That would be sort of status quo. It would have to come out of the reserves because they're not balanced. That county library program is not balanced. So that would drop their reserves to about $179,000 because they're so far out of balance. Apart from the admin fee, they would need to use $306,000 just to kind of keep whole, and it would have to come from sources from the city itself, ostensibly to keep us balanced. If you move across, if we go all the way to the 18% number, as recommended in the budget, they would have to use $437,000 of reserves to pay for it, to keep balanced, in addition to funding that admin fee of 18%. So they would be left with $48,000 in reserves.
So so in other words, and I don't know what we're going to do up here, but if we were to go all the way to 18%, the Goleta anyway has enough reserves for next year not to have any changes in services. They could cover
That is
their
correct.
entire budget.
Right,
Okay. The others might not so much.
right,
Okay.
right. Again, and that assumes that it's all paid for from reserves versus contributions from those jurisdictions.
Right. Okay. Ms. Murillo?
Madam Mayor, in red, the number for 13.5% and 15% is the same. Mr. Samario?
Yeah. So ignore the 13.5% option. So 9, 12, 15, 18, that's how you can look at it.
Well, some of us might be thinking about the
Is it
13.5% option.
13.5 or is it 15? Which is the correct column?
Yeah, we can do the calculation. My guess. Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll do the calculation. So then Buellton, you could see this much smaller branch. Their reserves at the end of this year is estimated to be about just under $60,000. And you can see, again, same formula, same approach, what their reserve balances would be. At 18% to the far right, they would still have a small amount of reserves of $7,000. Again, assuming the entire budget, their deficit is made up from reserves versus any other contributions. Solvang, you can see is probably in the worst shape, or one of the worst shape, maybe just behind Carpinteria, but you could see they would be in the negative to almost $30,000 at 18%, and somewhere in between that at various levels of admin fee increases. Even at 9%, they would still be, they would have $6,000, be in the negative $6,000 in terms of reserve balances. Montecito, 86,000, almost 87,000 at the end of this year. They would end up with 23,005 if we went to the 18%. Carpinteria, they are already in the negative at the end of this year. That's a projected number of about $1,200. So they would be the most impacted from a reserve perspective. They would be at 90,000 below reserves. It would be basically in deficit reserve. We wouldn't allow that. We would need a contribution from that agency in order to keep them whole. So any questions on this piece or these pieces? And I think Ms. Caliente has a number.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Did you
Mr.
want
Quick question. Do the other cities agree with the numbers that we're putting up here? Have they seen them in their agreement or not?
The admin fee numbers?
Yeah, well, just these numbers that we're talking about, yeah, and the reserve effect, are they in accord with us on this or not?
The reserve balances?
Yeah,
Well,
all these
we'll
numbers.
let you-
The other
when you
cities
speak,
said,
you
yes,
can
okay, we see what you're saying, and we agree with those numbers. I'm not make a recommendation. I just want to know if our estimates are in accord with what they say.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they would independently be calculated. We maintain these numbers, so we maintain the book, so we are calculating the reserve impacts based on these admin fees at different levels. So these are numbers we develop, we create, because we account for all the monies.
Okay, so that's not in debate then, is what we're
Right.
saying. Thank you.
Okay. We oversee the county budget program, and so the reserves, part of it is from the per capita funding. That whole thing
Yeah.
we put aside. There's going to be a study. They're going to figure out what to do and whether there's any changes. We're not
Right.
making any changes to that. We
Right.
made that decision. But some of these reserves had to do with monies left over in each of the different libraries from
Right.
that per capita funding, right?
Right.
Okay. So who gets that information every year? How do people know what's in their reserve balance? And who are they?
Madam Mayor, a couple of different ways. We do communicate with the city managers, and also there's a library advisory committee that meets quarterly. Every March of every fiscal year, we're required to give 3-year budgets at that meeting, and each city has a representative at that meeting, as well as the different districts in the county.
And okay, but does the county have? Okay, so you're talking to the cities, but you're also talking to the county. I mean, it's the county library system, right? Mm-hmm. So does the Board of Supervisors get this information, and how do they get that information?
Mayor Schneider, George Chapshin, the Community Services Director for the County of Santa Barbara, receives the budgets and then, I believe, passes those on to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, so for example, these numbers here that you're working with, when was that information given out to the cities and the county, and how?
Mayor Schneider, the administrative fee we've been discussing over the course of several years, 18% specifically was discussed, I believe, in October of 2016. The actual draft budgets were given to the city managers in March of this year, early March, and then at the Library Advisory Committee in April, we then presented them to the county.
So when you say it was discussed last October, what do you mean? It was like at a meeting and it was presented as how was it discussed?
It was discussed previous to that with the City of Goleta, as well as County Community Services Director George Chapshin, and then the Goleta City Council in holding their hearings on deciding if they should form their own municipality, put it in their staff report as that they received direction from the City of Santa Barbara that we were going to 18%. And then at that time, we confirmed that with the other entities
Okay,
as well.
so that's Goleta, but then Buellton, Solvang, Montecito, and Carpinteria. I mean, okay, so they had a similar kind of. They're not looking to leave the system. So Goleta
No.
had a whole different thing going on at one point. So
At the December Library Advisory Committee, or I believe it was actually November, it was an odd month, we did discuss it. I mean, we've been discussing the admin fee at length.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think I got some emails recently. I'm just trying to remember. I'm just trying to get the chronology of events here because we've gotten a lot of correspondence. Am I understanding correctly that Buellton was not part of our county system until recently? Were they part of Lompoc? And they moved over just recently?
Mayor Schneider, that is correct.
Okay.
I believe June 2015 they became, or July 1, 2015, they became part of the Santa Barbara Zone 1.
So 2 years ago?
Yes.
Not 1 year. Okay. All right. That helps. Just put that in my
And
head.
then,
Yeah.
if I may, Mayor Schneider, I do want to comment that these slides, I think there's a data entry issue. We did give the draft budgets to the city managers as well as to the council. And so I'd like to answer the question on the admin fee for the Goleta Library. 13.5% is $196,336.
Instead of 218, 151?
Yes.
It's 196?
Yes. In order to
Can you
make-
repeat that number
Yes.
again?
196,336.
$196,003 something. Okay, that's the 13.5. So the 15 number is correct, and the 13.5 needs to be corrected. Okay. Okay. All right, thank you. Ms. Murillo, did you have other questions?
Yes, ma'am, and it follows up on these questions. So these slides we're looking at now related to the branches and their reserves, have these slides and these numbers, have they been presented to the branches before today, or were they part of the meetings you've been having?
Mayor Schneider, Councilmember Murillo, the proposed budgets showing the full fiscal year 18 proposed budget, having the 18% admin fee, those were shared. And then these budgets at the 9, 12, 13.5, 15, and 18% were not, as we were waiting for direction from our council to send out new budgets. We did this morning send them all to the city managers for Goleta, Solvang, Buellton, and Carpinteria. And we plan to send new budgets again tomorrow if there's a decision here tonight.
Okay. And then to go back to the next slide, I caught another discrepancy. I think the
Yes.
next one there for Montecito, 13.5. So the 15% should be higher, and it's less, unless I'm going blind here. 52,622,
Mayor Schneider,
52,501.
I apologize. The number for 15% is 36,276.
In the red, right? That's what we're talking about. Okay. And then finally, I mean, I don't know about finally, but my next question. So I know you've been talking about raising the administrative fee. That's not the same thing as presenting something written, like a firm proposal. So the firm proposal was in April of 2017, correct?
In March of 2017,
Oh,
we
March?
communicated with the city managers. Yes. The timeline is that over the fall of 2016, we studied the administrative fee. We refined it. We wanted to make sure that the cost allocation plan only charged as appropriate. And then we held meetings to that with the city managers.
Okay, thank you.
But they knew the issue was coming because you had those conversations in the fall. So they may not have had the exact number or budget, but they knew the topic, that the topic should not have been new by March, April. It should have already been introduced.
Mayor
It wasn't
Schneider,
already
that is
introduced.
correct.
Okay. Okay. All right, please continue.
So I think, Jessica, you were going to cover this piece, is that correct? Or was I?
Mayor Schneider, council members, this slide is one that you saw at our presentation on May 22nd. It represents the general fund revenues for the library department. And the change for tonight is that we removed the administrative fee, the increase from the service charges. So this is a status quo with an admin fee at 9% and also included the general fund 1% subsidy reduction. I wanted to make sure that our council understood that the library has a significant revenue loss in fiscal year 18, including loss of some significant grants as well as the reduction in the county per capita. And so we are looking at a $239,254 in revenue shortfall this year. And so the decision tonight will have an impact to the library. And then again, one of the items requested to bring back is how we could possibly meet the gap if there is a reduction in the proposed budgets. And at a 12% admin fee, we're looking at a $149,579 cut to our budget, which is approximately 2 positions, and then it goes on from there. And as you can see, the library has various vacancies right now, and so we would, our programs are our people, and it would just mean a reduction in the services that we provide to the city of Santa Barbara, whatever cuts we make. And then lastly, I just wanted to remind everyone of the revenue sources for all of our branches. And paying most importantly paying attention to the city contribution. We're only looking for everyone to pay their fair share and to support the library system. We're dedicated to having innovative programming throughout the county library system. That's it. And that concludes our presentation for tonight.
Okay. Any other questions before I open public comment? Okay. We'll go to public comment. I'm probably going to say deja vu all over again. It's going to be, but welcome back to Santa Barbara City Hall. We'll start with Mayor Perotti of Goleta. And is Dana Grossi here? And you're giving your 2 minutes? Okay, so Mayor, you have up to 4 minutes, and then Councilmember Bennett, you'll be next. Welcome.
Mayor and City Council, I'm here today speaking as Goleta's mayor and as an individual supporter of all libraries. I'm not going to repeat everything I said at your last library budget hearing, but I am again respectfully urging you to either keep the 9% administration fee unchanged for 2017-2018, but if you conclude that raising the fee is absolutely necessary, please raise it only a small amount. This would allow time for the library consultant study to provide everyone a better understanding for the following year and future years. Also, I believe that the county's library consultant will be studying the administration fee, most likely concluding well before our respective 2018-2019 budget processes. The study conclusions would give you the best and most current information on costs and how much you would need to raise your fee the following years, if at all. In the same way, Goleta, as well as all branch libraries, will be better able to anticipate possible fee increases and have time to secure more funding. We've always paid what we were asked, and we will continue to provide our fair share. I want to also mention that there is some different information about when increasing the administration fee was raised and by how much. Our city heard about the actual proposed increase of our fees only recently. I believe that was in April. At our last library budget meeting, many members of the Library Advisory Committee spoke about not hearing specifics about this until April, including your Library Advisory Committee representative, Pat Saley. The City of Santa Barbara's decision today on how much to raise the fee is happening only weeks before the beginning of everyone's 2017-28 budget. In addition, what the fee is based on is still not clear, and I just received these numbers not too long ago. But when I look at today's new information, all of Galida's funding is not reflected. Second, if the fee is charged on the total revenue each library provides, the administrative fee listed is $15,260 too high in the 9% column, so I saw a discrepancy there, and continues to be too high under every percent increase listed. If the 9% is applied to something other than total revenues, it's fair to ask what that is. As I mentioned last time, basing it on the total revenue creates some disincentives for libraries to raise funds independently of the county's funding, such as Galida's Measure L library tax. Galida's library, like the others, will have very little time to raise more funds to adjust if a big fee increase takes effect in just a few weeks. So every library may have to almost immediately cut hours, staffing, and programs. I'm confident that you will consider all the immediate and dire consequences of applying a large fee increase now. It would result in immediately and drastic service cuts to many who need the library most: kids, students looking for a safe and quiet place to study, our seniors for a gathering place, and people whose only internet access is the library. Please don't let that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bennett, and then Miltez.
Madam Mayor, members of council, I want to start off by thanking you by sticking with the per capita allocation that was proposed originally and has been traditionally done. And so I firmly want to make sure that you understand that we do appreciate that very, very much. In this evening's conversation in regards to the administrative fee, I would just ask that you don't go for full cost recovery at this time. From the 9 to 18% obviously will be a stretch for many of us, and some it'll be almost impossible. But I understand where you're coming from, and I'll let you make that decision. I would like to point out, however, up there on that particular slide, if you look under other funding, that $430,713, the majority of that money comes from the city of Goleta. Even though you're not giving us credit, this becomes a real issue for us because we constantly state our residents pay through Measure L, just like the county unincorporated Eastern Goleta Valley pay through the Measure L effort that took place in 1989. That's no different than coming out of your general fund. It's coming out of our residents' pockets. That's tax revenue. And it should be appropriately and properly indicated so that you wouldn't see just a 7% from the city of Goleta. You would see a much higher percentage than that. That's one thing. I heard you state about the library system. One of the things I've learned from the state library, of all people, we have 3 systems: Santa Maria, Lompoc, and Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara County is not a library system. Santa Barbara County is very unique. You contract only for per capita. That's the county's involvement. It's yours, it's the city of Santa Maria's, and it's the city of Lompoc's. Those are the 3 library systems recognized by the state of California. I just want to make that clear because, again, that's another one of these issues that seems to continue to get confused with staff when we start talking about issues. And we really need some clarity on all these things. I would really, really appreciate that part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. White has a question
you,
from
Mr.
you.
Bennett.
Councilmember Bennett.
Sorry.
Hi. So you alluded to the Goleta line there and the $430,000. That is Measure L, you
Correct.
said? Could you give us a little more information on, could me anyway, that information on that? Measure L passed when and what is it?
The Goleta Library was essentially going down the tubes back in the late 80s. So the county put on the ballot for County Service Area 3, which was already in existence. Those residents represent where Measure L was voted on. Of course, City of Goleta didn't exist back then, so it included all of the incorporated area as well as the unincorporated eastern Goleta Valley. It doesn't include any of the other unincorporated folks. And it passed overwhelmingly. It passed in 1989 to approximately 80+%. So the residents overwhelmingly supported that. And unfortunately, for many, many years, or maybe forever, I don't know, I've only been involved in the last 10 and a half, the city never gets credit, nor does the county get credit, as this is a general fund contribution. But the reality is it's coming out of the taxpayers' pockets. However you want to look at it, it's still coming out of that very focused, specific pocket, if you will. No other library in the county voted to support their respective local library to keep it going and keep the doors open and keeping people paid. So that's where it came from.
And that's a property tax?
It's a parcel tax.
Parcel tax, great.
And then we learned, I know we've been castigated for changing our approach to these things. Our state legislature changed the law on how you can go forward with a parcel tax. It used to be universal, both in the city and in the county. And we were proposing to change. We were proposing to ask the voters to increase it. And at the very last moment, we found out, oh, well, the state legislature a year or two before that had changed the law. So you couldn't have the same kind of parcel tax in the county unincorporated area that had been previously voted on, which was the same in the city today and the same in the county. They would both be different. So we scrapped the effort, and that part didn't go forward. So, you know, we've been blamed for consternation. It's only because of circumstances that we've been dealt that's caused us to have to go back and punt and start over again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Milt Hess will be followed by Larry Nimmer.
Mayor Schneider, members of City Council, good evening. My name is Milt Hess, and I'm here this evening in my role as chair of our library board. Last month, I appeared before you to affirm the library board's position on the administrative fee that Santa Barbara charges the branch libraries in Zone 1, which is our zone. I would like to again remind you that Santa Barbara has subsidized the branch libraries in Zone 1 for millions of dollars over the past 10 years and probably longer. And the library board recommends that we stop subsidizing the other libraries now. So although the affected communities are opposed to it, our library board advocates an increase in the administrative fee to 18% for the next fiscal year. And thank you.
Thank you. Larry Nimmer, and then Tara O'Reilly. Do you have a video? It's not. There we go.
Hi, I'm Larry Nimmer, a filmmaker from Carpinteria. I have a short video to make to show you supporting.
I see it's 2 minutes, so you better turn it on. You only got, there you go.
I love the library.
Summer reading is super fun. For all 5 of my kids, it gets them excited to read.
This is a great program encouraging kids to read. They get rewards.
Yeah, I like to come here and read the newspapers.
Well, I come to use the computers for employment.
Do you not have a computer at home?
I do, but I just find it quiet here.
It's a good homework center. We get 1 hour on our homework every computer, so really it's good.
I come to the library 2 or 3 times a week.
I use it for looking for a job currently. And, I don't have a computer at home, so I use it here.
The library here is absolutely essential to our life in Carpinteria.
And if we didn't have the library, where would kids do their homework? It would just be chaos.
Growing up as a young gay man in Carpinteria was a really difficult thing to do, as it is for lots of young gay people, particularly if your father's the mayor. My mother chose to go to the library up the street and read everything that was available on the subject. And I would like to thank the Carpinteria Library for being accepted into my own family.
And the best part about it is that these people here are all nice to me.
The Literacy Volunteer Program is a wonderful part of our library, especially for the Hispanic-speaking community.
I like to do homework while here at the Carpinteria Library. I'm Janelle from the Carpinteria Library. See you next time. Bye. I love the library.
Gives you a little feel for the Carpinteria
Thank you.
Library. Thank you.
Tara O'Reilly. And then is Sherry Mendenhall here? Yeah, okay. And now, is it Calhoun Overman? Did you want to speak or not speak? Because you have two slips here. I'm speaking my time. I know you are. So do we want to give... Okay, so you got up to 6 minutes.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
Great. I can slow
And
down
then
a little bit.
Darcel Elliott will be after you.
All right. Thank you. My name is Tara O'Reilly. I was Carpinteria branch supervisor for 21 years. I retired in March of this year. Santa Barbara Public Library Administration's budget that I saw on the city's webpage shows increases of 45% projected expenditures for the Carpinteria branch for fiscal year 2018. There was very few numbers on that. Maybe some of you have seen it. The new draft that just came out, that just became available today, is $100,000 off from the one that's on your website. So it makes it pretty hard to kind of figure out where the money is going and how the numbers were arrived upon. So I'm skipping some of the comments that I had prepared because the numbers don't make sense from when I put them together this morning yesterday, based on other data that was on your website. My experience as branch supervisor during the last year and a half has shown that the Santa Barbara Public Library Director is neither able nor interested in fulfilling the role of providing services and leadership to the branches. Evidence include the following. The manager position that oversees the branches has remained vacant since October 2015. Although less managerial support is provided, the cost of these management services to the branches has climbed and continues to climb. We're restricted from adding high-quality donated materials such as books and DVDs to our own shelves. Meanwhile, proposed expenditures for such materials was tripled in one budget that was shared. Carpinteria Friends of the Library raised thousands of dollars to purchase much-needed computers for public use, but so many obstacles were erected that still, more than 8 months later, only a quarter of the funds have been expended. The library director insisted on controlling all purchases, thereby creating bottlenecks of efficiency. Another blow to our services was the sudden elimination last week of the long-established Carpinteria Library Homework Center program, some of which you saw in the video just there, and its staff. That position was funded through the end of the fiscal year. Summer reading program is our busiest time of year. Our local youth need this academically stimulating program. The Homework Center partners with United Way's Fun in the Sun, the Boys and Girls Club, and other groups during the crucial summer months to ensure that at-risk youth do not backslide. Without the Homework Center staff, this collaboration will vanish. That same week, 5 longtime Santa Barbara Central Library staff were terminated, even though the director bemoans being short-staffed. At the same time, new, higher-paid positions are being created. And there's more. The library director has people believing that people are spreading lies and that the library administration, about the library administration, and that people are uninformed. Yet she refuses to meet with those who ask tough questions. As she said to me about the Friends of the Library groups, I don't like talking to them. They are mean. Why would I want to spend my time with them? We are a heavily used branch in the center of town, and we're alarmed by the threats of library closure. These are the reasons that I oppose the increased administration fees at this time. This is also why I support the county's investigation and pursuit of an alternative organizational structure for the branch libraries as proposed by the Library Advisory Committee. I'd be happy to provide additional details or answer your questions. Thank you.
Mr. Dominguez has a question for you.
Yes.
I have a question. So you mentioned a lot of things in your remarks. Did you speak with anyone to help resolve these issues before now?
Which issues?
Any of the ones you mentioned
firings?
about personnel or not being communicated with or not getting responses?
There, well, in what capacity? I mean, I've been on there's the position that has not been filled for a year and a half. I don't really have any say in that matter.
Well, I'm just curious if you spoke with anyone about that.
Yes, I have spoken with.
Who did you speak with?
Well, I've spoken with other library staff. I mean, I don't really have a direct line to the city of Santa Barbara.
We have all of us, and I was just going to say in the future, feel free. To me, it's just a concern that things are brought up in the midst of a budget negotiation that really aren't budget things. They're certainly important.
I appreciate that.
Hold on,
yeah,
let me finish.
Sorry.
And I'd love to fix these problems because they sound serious.
Mm-hmm.
But, the library director's boss is here. He's the city manager. You can always talk to him. You can talk to any of us. So I would just recommend that in the future, earlier rather than later. I believe communication and conversations are great very early on, and so we can get a lot accomplished. So that's just what I wanted to ask. Thank you very much.
Okay. Fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Darcel Elliott, if you'd like to speak, you can figure out. Okay. Darcel Elliott, then B.L. Borve, George Relis, and Mayor Sierra.
Hi, I'm
And then
Darcel
Connie.
Elliott, speaking on behalf of First District County Supervisor Doss Williams. Doss couldn't be here with you this evening because he's at the Carpinteria City Council asking them for more library funding. Doss is also pushing for an increase of an additional increase of $200,000 through the county budget process we're currently going through. So hopefully you'll be happy to know you're not the only ones that he's asking for more from. And I just want to reiterate his request, well, really his plea to you for the last few months. I know he's talked to most of you directly, asking to phase in the administrative fee. Our personal request is to 12%, but really anything lower than the 18% would be helpful. Our libraries are going through a time of transition. As you saw on the slides that your staff presented to you, we're spending down our reserves and need to find a new sustainable way to fund and administer our libraries. And the county is going through a study right now to determine what the best path forward is. And Doss is ready to spearhead any changes that need to be made. And he wants to work together as a team with everyone in the region that invests in our libraries. And of course, the city of Santa Barbara is our largest investor in the libraries. So we want to be a partner with you and move forward together and figure out the best path forward. So anything that you can do to alleviate some of the burden on our libraries for this coming year as we're going through that transition would be really appreciated. Thank you so much, and I really want to thank your staff, especially Jessica, for all the work that they've done with us over the last, it feels like a year, but I guess it's only been 8 months, so thank you.
You're welcome. Actually, Ms. Elliott, and I know you're new to the county, but you've done a lot of work on researching the libraries. Is this unusual for cities to have oversight over the libraries? I'm comparing to other counties in California, correct?
Yes, my understanding is it's the only one in the
So
state.
as part of the study, the county is looking into what if the county actually took over the process?
Yes,
Is that part of
yeah.
the study as well?
Yeah, I should have brought the RFP of what we're asking the consultant for. It's a laundry list of things, but one of them is looking at the administration structure for our county-wide system.
Okay.
If, looking at other options.
And do you know the timing of when? I know the RFP is just being put together now, right? So,
yes.
So the hope is by budget time next year or later than that? What's the
I think definitely by budget time next year. I think our goal is to have, I don't want to say the exact timeline because I'm not totally certain on that, but I know that we're prepared to have it ready for the next coming budget year.
Okay, that helps.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Hart has a question.
Yeah, just to put a real fine point on this, because this is really the issue, is the timing of this information. I'm scared that we're going to have exactly the same problem with that study, and that it's going to come in April-ish. and people are going to say that's way too late. So is there, maybe you can't answer this right now, but maybe there's a way to find out when this is really going to be done, because it's absolutely critical. Everyone in this room is pointing toward that information as being the soft landing to this conversation. And if that is going to create the same dynamic that we're in right now, it's not going to solve the problem. It's not going to help the conversation. It's going to make it just as bad next year as it is now. So I think we need, before our decision, some kind of real clarity on that date.
Yeah, I can go make a phone call right now.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Any other questions for me?
Nope. Okay, thank you. Okay, BL Borave.
Mayor Schneider, council members, thank you for your time this evening. I want to support the comments of those who have already spoken or will still speak, requesting that you do not impose a significant fee increase on the county branch libraries just for the coming year. I realize that there is this question about the RFP and what it's really going to cover when it comes to the contract and the timing, and I appreciate Councilmember Dominguez saying if we can just have conversations in advance of crisis moments or critical moments, that will make a lot of things go a lot better, and I certainly hope that that will be the case with the RFP, and I have confidence that Darcel will come back and say yes. I live in Goleta, but I know from attending the most recent LA Library Advisory Committee meeting that the impacts, according to all the representatives there, would be dramatic and drastic on every library. And tonight I just want to raise quickly a couple of points, especially for those of us who are not city officials. We're just seeing these charts and these numbers now. And I have to say, I'm concerned and disappointed that we're seeing them only today with no time to seriously review any of the numbers or understand them. Things may be absolutely accurate, or there may be something missing, as Councilmember Bennett indicated, or otherwise questionable. And my second concern is that I'm still not clear on the determination of the administrative fee. There are numbers to be sure, but with insufficient explanation. Assuming for the moment that the fee is imposed on the total revenues, an assumption that I don't necessarily agree with, I'm confused by the numbers. As Mayor Perotti asked, for example, where does the $130,000 administrative fee at 9% come from? When the calculation on total revenues yields an amount that's $15,000 less than that, and that appears to be the case on every column of every percent for every city and branch library. The charts don't shed sufficient light on the question of how the administrative fee was determined to be that number, nor does it appear to give the accurate figures for what it does provide. I know this is a challenging issue for all of you, for the county, and for all the libraries affected, and I would urge you to minimize the harsh impacts for the coming year and give the county consultant in every branch library time and opportunity to address all the library issues in the most appropriate ways, and ultimately that will benefit everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Ellis?
I'm George Ellis, and as you know, I'm from Goleta, but I'm really here to speak for all the libraries, as I know you are. We can all acknowledge there's been some disagreement about when libraries were notified and how specifically about the possibility of a city administration fee being raised. However, there are some things that are quite clear. We know that many of us heard about it at the May 22nd meeting. We heard for the first time that you've been subsidizing libraries for millions of dollars. I'm pretty sure it was the first time where I think you would have done something about it earlier. And I only cite that because I think it's an explanation that Goleta and other cities are not leeches. We're not taking advantage of something. If we don't know about the subsidy, how can we be taking advantage of it? That's the first thing. We also know that several oral and written requests about what goes into the administration fee, how it's calculated, have gone unanswered. Lots of people have asked for it, and we want to know more about the fee, and this has not been illuminating. And the inconsistencies actually puzzle us, as BL just mentioned. And the reason it's important is not so much because we doubt the fee, but it's important because if we understood the fee, we could adjust to it. We could look at it and say, oh, look, we're being charged for this. Well, maybe we can't afford this. Maybe we need to afford something else. But we can't do that right now. It seems highly likely, as you've heard, and I think you appreciate, that the county's consultant will be studying not just the allocation of funds, but also this fee. And we think that's really important. And most of all, it's really clear that we're 3 weeks away from the budget starting up. And it's really clear that if you do something drastic today, people are going to get hurt. It's not something clinical. Those people you saw, they're going to get hurt. The people, many of whom can afford the least to be hurt. They need a place that's safe. They need a place to look for jobs. And I'm not impressed that we could all go down with the reserves. First of all, not all libraries can. And second of all, look at your reserve. You don't want to spend down your whole reserve. Reserves are there for a reason. It's not just a piggy bank that you go after. So I'm asking you respectfully, please consider a moderate increase, if any, until we can get the data. And when we have the data, we'll pay our fair share.
Thank you. Mayor Sierra.
Mayor Schneider, council members, thank you for saving the best for last. Sorry, just kidding. I am representing the City of Buellton, and I am a member of the Library Advisory Committee. And I went to the Library Advisory Committee in March when all of the budgets were coming out for each of our libraries, Carpinteria, Solvang, Lompoc, Santa Maria. They had their budgets. District 1 was a blank page. There was no budget. They hadn't put it together yet in March. In April, when it did come to us, our library director was unable to make that meeting. So it's been very hard for the City of Buellton to try to figure out how we're going to come up with a 130% increase. We were very fortunate to be able to join your city library system from Lompoc. And the first year, the 2015-16, we paid 9% of per capita. I think you got my letter. Last year, it was 9% of the total budget, and that was a big jump for us. We still paid more in, $141,641, because we'd had to close the library an extra day, and we wanted to reopen that day, and we were getting our own library supervisor. Well, we paid the money so we could get those things done, and unfortunately, we got our supervisor, I think, was it April? April of this year, and we're still closed on Thursdays. So that's why we show some extra money left over once they get into our surplus. When we joined, we were very excited. Excuse me. You've got a beautiful library system. We were so happy to be a part of it. We had never been told that we were being subsidized. And Buellton we're a pretty proud little town. We like to take care of ourselves. But this 130% increase is really steep for our citizens, our 5,000 residents. And we would truly appreciate it if you could increase that over a time period or wait until the county study is done. So that's it.
Thank you.
Appreciate your help. Thank you,
Mayor. And then, Connie, did you want to speak? It has to be about the library, right? Because your message said something different, so.
Yeah. You said Buellton didn't have a library in 2015?
No, it just moved from one system to another.
Location to another.
Whoever managed it was different 2 years ago, that's all.
Yeah. Okay. What's the other thing I wrote down?
Something about bathrooms.
Yeah. There's been a lot of controversy in this town regarding bathrooms.
Okay, but you
and
need,
when
to,
they're
you need
open
to keep it to the library.
And what time they close.
Okay.
So I think you should look into that since the water's all filled up now.
Thank you. Great. Okay, that concludes the public comment. It's to the council.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Just a couple comments. One, Darcel just indicated that the study would be, Ms. Elliott, would be completed at the end of the calendar year.
Okay.
So that's the plan for that. I also want to just talk a little bit about the admin fee because there's questions about where does it come from. It's hard to see the details. So if you can appreciate it, there is a lot of detail behind those numbers that I summarized for you. The details are in a cost allocation plan, as I mentioned. There are a lot of math. It's a document that's about 3 inches high. Within that, it spells out those costs that we're talking about. If one wanted to see the details, and I think one of the city managers did ask for that, and I provided sort of reconciliation to that plan. But it's a plan that we have to, it's not something we can choose how it's created. It's based on federal guidelines, how we establish it. So it's really a complicated plan. We have a consultant every 2 years that updates that plan. So, but the numbers are derived from that. plan, and you could see that if you wanted to get into the details where those numbers of $557,000 come from if one wanted to do that. But we didn't do that because there's a lot of detail. It could be really complicated here.
Okay, thank you.
And
Yes.
one last thing, the admin fee. So our expectation is that it's really a policy discussion, a decision of council, how we spread an admin fee or how we pay for that and recover that. We weren't expecting at least that would be the scope of an RFP for the county of the unincorporated area, because that's really comes out of our own cost allocation plan. You could ask for that, but we weren't expecting that would be part of that, because that's really our policy and what our costs are and how we would spread that out to the various branches.
Okay. Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So may I ask a couple more questions at this point?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I'm curious about how this started and what is the city's benefit, what are we getting out of this arrangement where we're running so many libraries? How and when did it start?
Mayor Schneider, Councilmember White, in terms of the entire county system, when did it start?
When did Santa Barbara City start managing libraries outside of its jurisdiction?
Over 100 years ago. Okay. Initially, I believe that the city of Santa Barbara managed the libraries for the entire county. Okay. And then I believe approximately around 1959, 1960, it was broken out into the 3 zones. And then still at that time, Carpinteria, Buellton, Solvang, and Goleta were not incorporated cities. And so, but today it's a different structure in which we have 4 municipalities in our system. And so there's been many funding discussions going back to at my time here in Santa Barbara, just back to 2015. Again, Community Services Director George Chapshin, recognizing that the funding is decreasing. In terms of what we get out of it, that is an open-ended question. I mean, we're supposed to get collaboration, the benefit of purchasing power on a bigger scale, being able to buy in bulk, as you will, but that requires all participants to be paying a certain portion, their piece of the pie.
So bulk purchasing and sort of the power of being a bigger entity would be the conceptual benefit that we receive.
Correct. It's similar to how we're a part of the Black Gold Library system. If you share resources, share knowledge, share materials, hopefully it's to the benefit for the end user.
But the Black Gold system could run. It's run with independent systems as well, which we're not managing. We could still be part of Black Gold systems that we don't run. Would that not be the case? Okay, thank you. And let's see, a couple more. Do you know of, does staff know of other comparable services that either Santa Barbara provides or other cities provide to other entities in our area? Is this just absolutely a unique experience here?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember White, I could think of in the enterprise area, water, we treat water on behalf of other jurisdictions. I'm trying to think of what else. Not us. Yeah. I mean, from the county perspective, they certainly provide sheriff services to smaller communities like Goleta and Clark.
County is a different animal there. Okay. All right. That's enough for now. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, staff.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, for the pleasure of losing money every year, we're getting kind of the regional finger wag here. So I'd like to ask a few questions about the way things were posed tonight and see if I can get some understanding. First of all, I'd like to talk about the timing. We talked about that last time. I'd like to talk about it again because many agencies feel like they were taken by surprise by this, and that's wasn't my understanding. But do you have a response to that, Ms. Caliente?
Mayor Schneider, Councilmember Rouse, as I indicated previously, I have met with the Community Services Director for the county since 2015. It was my understanding that he was communicating as well to the cities. And if that did not occur, I do not know. and with all due respect to Mayor Prodi, in the City of Goleta's council member agenda report for October of 2016, they do mention the 18% admin fee. And so as the library director, and I believe it was at the May 22nd meeting where council member Hart indicated that his father had so many bosses, well, I too have to have a lot of people that I'm trying to keep in the loop, and I do my best to make sure the city managers are aware of issues. For example, I've communicated with the Carpinteria city manager many times via phone or email and don't always get responses. And so sometimes things don't make it to a friends group or something like that. But I can assure you that I am trying to communicate everything to all of the different entities. But the county's role in this, as it is a contract with the county of Santa Barbara, and their representative, George Chapshin, should also be communicating all of these discussions and changes. And in terms of giving a specific budget with 18% on it, that couldn't really be forecasted until our own city finance had all the different allocated costs and things of that nature. In February of 2017, the City of Goleta indicated they would like to stay with the Santa Barbara Library System. And so that is why we could not issue budgets for the March LAC meeting. But we did have a meeting in March with all of the city managers where we shared all of the budgets and discussed the increased admin fee, did the same presentation that you see here explaining how the cost allocation worked, and that's where we discussed the unincorporated split as well.
All right. And then I understand how arcane our admin fees can be interdepartmentally within our own city, so I get that part of it. But Mr. Samario, can you, I am also confused by looking at the reports in terms of how the admin fee percentages are calculated. Are they a percentage of total revenue, or is it a different number?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, they are a percentage of the operating budget, the expenditures, not revenues. So that, I think that's why there was some particular...
The expenditures, not the revenues.
Yep, so it's 9% applied to their total operating budgets.
Total operating expenditures.
Right.
Okay. So I was looking at the wrong number. All right. Thank you for clearing that up.
Sure.
Anyone else? Yep, questions, comments, whichever.
Okay.
Mr.
All
White
right.
and then Ms. Muriel.
Okay. Well, I'll jump in with some comments. I sure appreciate the trauma as all of our budgets are tightening all over the place, where it's just the fat went away. I mean, really, after the crash, we've all been kind of struggling to balance budgets. And this piece here, I can share that we struggled the last few years with trying to get a handle on the golf course. It's just one of those pieces which is just was losing money, and how do we handle it? And it was very difficult. And this one is kind of like that, and it's unique. And then, of course, the golf course is also less unique, but at least it's an outlier of some kind. So I don't understand why we're continuing to do this. So that's my gut feeling is that as a city, I'm just wondering why we're doing this as a whole. I'm thinking we might be better off as a city to be running our two libraries and being part of some kind of other organization, whether it's a county organization that's doing its distribution of the per capitas or whatever. So that's in structure. I can sure appreciate other jurisdictions going, well, you're accounting, you're paying your lawyers to, out of our pockets and this kind of stuff. Well, and you don't have control over it. And I totally get, we all get that. You want to be able to have a handle on the people that are charging you. So that is a fundamental piece of what I'm coming to this meeting with, is to say I question whether the city of Santa Barbara should be doing this over the long term. I need to be convinced that this is a good idea. So as we go forward, just over the years, and I'm not talking about doing bang coming down with something serious today, but in concept is. My gut feeling is we can do better, and so I'd like us to be focusing on this issue such that we're going, is this a good thing, or
should we be going a different direction? I'm imagining the county study is going to provide us some information in that area. But we can do the same from our end too, and analyze our system. Obviously, if money that is, all the comments about the kids in Carpinteria or everywhere else that are benefiting and would lose out, we have the stories are the exact same here on a bigger scale. The East Side Library could double down, could triple down, and we'd still have kids that need help and so forth. So the fact that it's not somebody that's getting cut off, it's somebody that's not somebody isn't coming into that library and getting services who might otherwise have if this money were available to us. So the squeeze is a little different form, but it's a squeeze. So that's the direction that I want. I want the city of Santa Barbara to be focusing on whether this is a good idea to even continue this, let's say on a 3-year kind of a time frame, that in 3 years we would conceivably be out of the business of running libraries throughout the county. And that in the meantime, I'm game to cut the subsidies by, let's just say I like that the 13.5 starts to show up in there as a number. The 13.5%, okay, is somewhere in there. As a way to, it's a goodwill gesture to all of our partners and neighbors and such, and so it would be a phasing. So those are the two basic pieces that come out of my launching into this effort. I look forward to hearing what my colleagues have to say.
Thank you. Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. I'd like to start by expressing support for our library director and our library department, and I have faith, Ms. Caliente, that you'll go forward and solve these challenging issues. And I heard about the personnel changes in Carpinteria and down in the Central Library, and these are delicate matters, and I know that they'll be handled in a sensitive way. And it's true, I think we have been subsidizing the branch libraries, but the folks are right that we haven't made an issue of it, and I'm not ashamed of that or resentful, and I'm glad that libraries have been flourishing as much as they can under that system. But that's not to say that we shouldn't make a change going forward in terms of the overhead fees. And I'm hoping Goleta doesn't leave the system. I'm sure you're looking at that, but maybe we're stronger together. And I really like the idea of the shared costs and bulk purchasing and centralizing things would help the smaller libraries. And to Supervisor Williams, I really like the idea. I came away from the last meeting with the sense that people had a love of libraries. And thank you, Mr. Nimmer, for bringing that sensibility back tonight. And that I really felt like we could start working together just based on that. And maybe that's why there's so much arm wrestling going on out there, because we all just love our libraries. And I think someone from the city of Santa Barbara, I offer myself, should be engaged with Supervisor Williams if he's really doing something that's system-wide, because we have been the umbrella organization for these last 100 years, and we should be part of that. But some of the solutions are beefing up the Friends groups, Community Service District. Bravo to Goleta for passing that and generating funds from the residents to support the libraries. Private fundraising events. There's a whole lot of ways to raise money in private money for public libraries. So, and then the consultant report, I think, would show whether the county should take it over or where the individual libraries can do their own whatever it is, right? The task or the service, maybe you can provide it for yourself. And so we are in an era of change. And let's try to do it nicely. And I would support 13.5% because it's halfway between 9 and 18 just for this year. And then maybe the consultant's report will tell us more. I used to work with a man named Mr. Tuttle, and he used to say, we'll be smarter later. So I think the consultant report will be smarter later on how to handle next year's question. But I do ask that we stay civil and put the libraries first. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hart?
Yeah, I want to start there too, because I think I don't support the idea that the city unilaterally withdraw from the regional library system. I think that would be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But I do think we have a lot of work to do to get back to a collaborative place, and that's the potential of this system, is the collaboration. And something's not working as well as it should, as evidenced by the differences of opinion about timing and numbers. There is clearly a transparency problem, whether I'm not going to ascribe responsibility for that, but we all collectively need to work harder. And I'm concerned that we just don't have the kind of factual understanding and shared agreement on the facts as they exist today. So I personally don't think we should increase the fee this fiscal year. But I do think we should send a very strong signal that next year it will be a certain amount, because I think we are going to get into this trap, even with the good timing of this study from the county. And that's, thank you, Ms. Elliott, for sharing that. Having that done at the end of the calendar year will set it up for the right timing for next year. But I don't think it is a panacea. It is not going to be able to unpack the complexity of the overhead fee as Mr. Smario described. That is just the reality of an incredibly expensive, large organization. No consultant in 6 months is going to be able to duplicate that study and provide independent analysis of that. There will be more questions from that process than there even is today. So I don't want people to think that somebody coming into our system and saying, let's look under the hood of the city of Santa Barbara and how they administer costs, is going to be able to come to a conclusion which everyone around here will go, oh, of course, that's the answer. There will continue to be a disagreement about those facts. So what I don't think there is, what I'm sensing is there is recognition that with this new information, there is some cost subsidy going on of some amount. And I would hope that we would be able to kind of come together as a collective group and say, let's not have this pain now because it's sudden and it's a surprise and it's too impactful on the folks who are using the services, but let's figure out some compromise number for next year, and then we can have a longer, more protracted, involved, fact-based conversation about where this all ought to go. In my hope, with the goal of continuing the collaborative effort that we're all trying to work in, because we are stronger together. There is an upside to this in terms of the professionalism. The people is the programs. The professionalism, the economies of scale that come with having a larger system is significant. I know that from my dinner table conversations with my father. You can have a branch, you can open up the doors, you can have this level of staffing. That's one library system, or you can have a professional system that is sharing responsibilities and costs and economies of scale. That's a modern 21st century library system, and that's what we ought to be aspiring to. Not just degenerating down to each little community has its own building, that it's open a certain number of hours, and the book and materials budgets are not the economy of scale, orders of magnitude, sophistication that can come from a collaborative system. So I understand that represents a potential cut to the city's internal library budget, and I'm not prepared to do that either. And I think that's what our job up here is to not have those choices like that. We have other ways to address that issue rather than having this pain go to the library, and I think we should exercise that judgment up here. And I think that's what our job is to do.
Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, we have two tremendous community resources within the city of Santa Barbara, the East Side Library and the main library branch. Both are valuable, as are the branch libraries, because they become community centers, they become centers of culture, meeting places, and a lot of services besides just checking out books. I get all that. However, as I look towards the future, I have to lean towards what Mr. White's saying. I go, are we really prepared, and are we really doing the right thing going forward, trying to manage things regionally when it is actually a rather unusual situation? Unfortunately, like Ms. Elliott said, we will have some results from the study by the end of the calendar year. So, but as I look at the numbers of the various libraries, it seems like there's a ticking time bomb anyway. The administrative fees notwithstanding, everybody's still operating in the red going forward. And like a lot of things, like retail, like whatever, brick and mortar libraries are going to have to evolve somehow, because at some point in time we're all going to have to figure out how we're going to finance these things. I think they are valuable. They're clearly they're the cultural center of all of our little communities. But at what price? At what point in time do we say we can't do this anymore? And I certainly don't want to do anything at the expense of our own central library, and especially not our East Side library, which are really, really, really critical within the city. And I'm not as familiar with the branch libraries, but that's really what it is. So I would say, something like either a no change or a moderate change, like the 12% number for this year, pending what we can gather informationally, regionally, from the regional study. But I think Mr. White has a point. I think at some point in time we're going to have to rethink about our role and our mission, and whether or not we really are the people to administer Goleta, Carpinteria, Solvang, and Buellton. I don't know that. It's something we're going to have to consider, because clearly, if the numbers show, and it is, we do have a lot of expenses in personnel, and people. It's a people-intensive business to run. We're not on a good trajectory in terms of coming out, fiscally sound in the end of the game. So, I think that I would be supportive of something, not to the full 18%, but something either no change or something smaller in between, with an eye towards exploring the entire system within the next fiscal year and seeing how we want to do this collaboratively with all the partners in the game.
Mr. Hotchkiss?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Numbers aside, does the system work pretty well now, as is?
Mayor Schneider, Councilmember Hotchkiss, we've spent a lot of time talking about funding and equitabilities over the last couple of years, but overall, I mean, everybody who works at the branch libraries and at the city libraries are working as hard as they can to ensure services at all of the branches and city libraries.
Do we have any feedback saying we're doing a good job?
From
customers' point of view.
We receive comments all the time from our users, both in the city and throughout the branch. And while not all of them are compliments, we do receive large numbers of those as well.
Okay. Well, I don't see tearing up the system just because we think it needs improving. I think it does need improving, but I would like to go forward with it towards the 18%, with half of that the first year and half that the second year. It's always going to be hard to get the price increased if I was in Goleta, for instance. But remember that we're taking money from people in Santa Barbara, essentially. So our job is to think about them. And that's what we're elected to do. That doesn't mean we ignore our neighbors, but it means that, as you're often saying about with transients, everybody has to do a job, and right now we're doing the whole thing. So I think it is unfortunately going to be painful. I don't think there's going to be library closures, but there may be some reductions in services or necessity in Carpinteria to get more volunteers. But I don't want to, I don't know if subsidize is the right word, but I don't want to shortchange people of Santa Barbara for the sake of others just because we did it that way for so long. So I would support, if others would agree, to going from the 18% and 15 half increments, first year half, second year half, so that everybody knows that's our target. And if the study comes back and says something different, then we ought to readjust. I get a feeling when the study comes back, we're going to all be here again and have a big fight all over again. So I don't think that the study's going to give us the silver bullet that we want. Anyway, those are my suggestions. Thank you for listening.
Mr. Dominguez?
So I think the big lesson learned is we need to cooperate and communicate more regionally on issues like this. I'm impressed by the passion and the perseverance of our neighbors showing up. I'm impressed by the Goleta and Buellton and Carp electeds with my communications with them. I may have some technical or legal issues about dates and stuff, but I think the fact that you're here really speaks a lot. There's a fairness issue that you've spoken to that elevates above some of the technical arguments. Things about notice, which you didn't necessarily make, but I learned about this issue in December, so I'm pretty sure a lot of people knew about this last year. So we've seen notice kind of used as a last resort argument in a lot of contexts in the last year, whether it's bike master plans or individual projects. And I'm often skeptical of that. I think in this case, there was plenty of notice. So to me, it's not a notice issue. It's just more of an action. What could have been done once the notice was made or once we started the discussion? I think the city we could have been more proactive in, hey, we're letting you know, but we're willing to work with you, and here's some ideas, and we could have really been constructive. I want to applaud the supervisor, Doss Williams, who approached me at the very beginning of the year and said, hey, this is going to be a problem. So he was aware of it, and his staff was working on this diligently since then. So there's a potential area to do more regional cooperation by maybe using the supervisors as a nexus in some of these situations. Mr. Samario, I think he is available for anyone who does have questions about some of the numbers. I think the first step, of course, is to draw the lines and figure out philosophically and policy-wise where we want to go. Then we can dig into the numbers. So, but I want to, maybe you can comment on that if you feel it's appropriate about being available for people who have questions about it. And let's see, I think I had one more note here. So I think coming from the East Side area, my district includes the East Side Library. We have 4,000 K through 12 students within 7 blocks of that library. It's a very important facility. So my concern is that library, that branch would lose services depending on how we subsidize other branches. So that's where I'm coming from this. I'd love to see the 13.5. It sounds like that's the consensus from council. So that's where I would land.
Thank you. Thank you again, many of you, for a second time on the same issue to come, and for all the emails for those listening. I don't want to repeat everything that was said, but I think there is consensus that obviously communication is a good thing. I would agree. I don't think any of us really knew the extent of the change or what the city general fund budget was providing to residents outside the city of Santa Barbara, really since maybe late last year when the issue was first come up, and that happens. And so I want to reiterate what was said during public comment. We're not trying to put blame on anyone saying you're taking our money. This has been an issue that has come up to the surface, and we're trying to grapple with it. Many emails I've received saying, please don't cut library services, and I say, right, exactly. And this is all library services. It's all, so it's not like we can take water rates and plug in library services. This is however our budget's going to work. If we're changing the 18% down to another number, that's going to be some library services somewhere. It just might be the city of Santa Barbara versus other places. So we need to work that out. I would much rather deal with the issue as a whole as opposed to nitpicking the numbers, because the numbers are complicated, and if we just looked at fault that something doesn't add up exactly right, then we're missing the point of what we're trying to accomplish, which is to have good quality library services throughout the whole area. So I do look forward to seeing this study. I would agree with Councilmember Hart. It's not going to just say, oh, now we know what to do next year, and we might get the report, which it'll have good information by the end of this calendar year. But I don't think all the questions will be answered in time for budgets this time next year. So this is an ongoing conversation of what we want to do. I generally think that working regionally is good, and I wonder at the same time, it's been talked about, if we are the right entity to run the program. And so to me, it's just getting that information, and perhaps that study will help us illuminate better about what the appropriate structure may be. Just because we've done things for so long doesn't mean we have to or should continue doing the same thing in the same way. So I'm hearing consensus for 13.5%. And I think eventually, assuming we are continuing running this program, we need to ease in to have at least, it's not full cost recovery, pretty darn close to it over the course of the period of time. But I do agree with the comments that have been said that a big hit right up front is it's too much of a big hit. So to ease that in is important. I was relieved to see with the numbers today, at least for Goleta, that there's enough money in reserves to cover this cost for this year. So the concern about losing services, I don't think should be a problem, because you have ample money in reserves to cover that portion if we go to 13.5%. The other cities I'm a little more concerned about, obviously, for looking at what's in their reserve policy. I'm hoping Supervisor Williams is successful in Carpinteria. I would strongly encourage the voters in Carpinteria to consider a parcel tax like the Goleta area. I think that would serve you well. You have control over those funds into the library system. I think it would pass overwhelmingly, and I bet you would have support from throughout the whole region, because we all love our libraries. And perhaps Buellton and Solvang would work together on something similar as well that might actually solve some concerns looking into next year for potential new revenue sources. So I'll agree with, I think most of us got down to the 13.5% for next year, and I'm confident that we'll figure out how to make this work better for everyone. But it's all about the love of libraries, so that's really where we're all coming down to. So we do need a motion of some capacity if someone wants to make that. Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that our council approve a 13.5% administrative fee for this year.
For fiscal year 18?
For 2018.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Hotchkiss. Okay, Mr. Hotchkiss to the motion. Did you have something? Mr. Hart?
Yeah, I'm just not going to support the motion. I think it's too much too soon.
Okay.
And I would prefer that we phased it over a 2-year period.
Okay. All right. To the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, that's 6-1, Hart's opposed. Thank you very much. And with that, is there anything else for the good of the order, as they say?
No.
All right.
That's it.
So we do not have a budget
Prop
hearing.
218 hearing.
We'll have a 218 hearing tomorrow, but we do not have a budget hearing Wednesday. We are going to cancel that meeting on Wednesday. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.